When I first heard people say, run slow to be able to run fast, I thought people were absolutely out of their flippin' minds. Like, how do you do that, right? So I took it upon myself over the last 4 years to experiment with the Maffetone method, right? To experiment and see what that would do for me in my running. And over the last 4 years, I have a number of thoughts about this whole process, about running slow to be able to run fast. And to be able to run an ultra marathon, which is pretty far, like 80 kilometers or 50 miles is a long way to go. I've run marathons, I've also run 10Ks, and I've run a lot of in between. The one thing that I can say is I've experienced a really good marathon, and I've also experienced a really crappy marathon. And the crappy one really sticks out in my brain because I don't know what it is about negative things, but it seems to kind of absorb the oxygen in the air, and sometimes that happens to me. So that race kind of really sticks out. Now the concept goes something like this. If you run slow at the same low heart rate, your body will adapt, you will improve, and you'll be able to run longer at that same low heart rate. The premise of building an aerobic base by running slow over time, consistently, will build your aerobic base to a point where you will improve as a runner. That is the concept. By running so slow that you're going to be burning fat as a fuel source. But then there are points where what happens if it stops working? Then what happens? Then what do you do? Well, we can talk about that later. But for right now, I want you to think, run slow continuously for like 3 to 6 months. Check to see if you're improving by running a math test. And that's basically kind of like running a particular route that you would run once a month. And that would be just to be able to measure whether or not you're improving. And ideally, what should happen is the longer you run at that same low heart rate for a mile or kilometer, after a kilometer and after a mile, over time you will start to see a decrease in how far you're able to run, as long as you're keeping that same low heart rate. Now, the reason why this could work extremely well, specifically if you're training to run a marathon, is you're not going to burn out. Anyone that's run a marathon knows that it takes a lot of dedication, a lot of training, a lot of frustration. And I know some people who have gotten sick. They've come down with some kind of flu or some kind of cold, or something has happened to them before they were able to run the marathon, and they've had to cancel and lose the money and all that kind of stuff, right? And that kind of sucks when that happens. I mean, it happened to me. Happened to me, and I was frustrated, but I was trying to be better, and I was just dehydrated on the day of. And I didn't really realize it until halfway through. I'm like, boom, I hit the wall. I bonked really bad. I had nothing left in my glycogen stores, like nothing left that I could readily access, because I was running I was too fast. I was running way too fast to be able to continue if I didn't have the fuel to put back in. And I ran myself to a point where it just failed. I look back and I go, okay, if I had used this whole Maffetone method years ago, and I started training using this method, 180 minus your age, right? If I had started using this method way back when, I think I would have been way further along than I am today, right? I think things would have been very, very different. However, I probably wouldn't have the YouTube channel that I have today, but I digress, sorry. But the thing is when you're running a marathon, you're not supposed to be like redlining like the whole thing. Like, that's crazy. And that's typically what's happened to me on a lot of the races. I mean, yeah, okay, you want to race. Yeah, you want to run fast, but you don't want to burn yourself out of the race. Like, you want to be there to finish the race. This is how I would think about it. When you're running a marathon, you want to be able to get to the finish line. If you run in your aerobic zone, you should be able to finish the race if you've done your training, okay? Now, I'm not going to say run the whole entire race using your MAF number, right? Now, you could if that's what you wanted, but if you wanted to be able to negative split, meaning the first half you're going to run slower than the last half, in my head, this is the way that I would think about it, is I'm going to run the first part of the marathon at a pace that is in my higher aerobic pace, not my MAF number, but a higher number, but still in my zone 2, okay? Maybe slowly getting to the lower of zone 3. Now, depending on how your training has gone, this may be very different for you, but for me, if I think about this, I'll do the first part slower, second part, I'll pick it up. Now, the reason I would start to pick it up is because while I've been running as slow as I've been running, I've been burning a lot of just fat storage, right? I've just been burning what I've got on me now. Because at the latter part, when I want to start like really dialing in and like racing like the last half, then I'll be consuming a lot of glycogen, right? I'll be using that from my kidneys or from my liver. I'll be using that from my liver and from my muscles. It'll be able to draw it out. And I think what happened to me when I was running that marathon a number of years ago where it didn't go so well, none of that happened. I literally started off racing from the get-go, and I didn't have enough nutrition stored up in my liver to be able to get me to the finish line, even though I was still trying to consume what little nutrition I had. So I literally just bonked and I didn't have anything left. And my body was like, I don't know, tripping. Like it was just having this hiccup where it couldn't access and burn my fat as a fuel source. The body was having a hard time switching over to that. Now I know it's not exactly, you know, you're either burning fat or you're burning carbs. Like it's not like one or the other. You're burning both at, you know, even when you're running slow, right? Like, but to be able to race and be in a position to do that, my body just couldn't do it. So over the years, I've been using the Maffetone method. It's allowed me to teach my body how to burn fat as a fuel and how to switch back and forth, because before it couldn't do that. Now I've been actually trying some experiments where I'm doing exactly what I just told you about, right? With the latter half running faster at the end. So at the end of a race, while I'm just sprinting, well, not sprinting, but while I'm picking up the pace and I'm running more of a tempo run, right? Higher zone 3, then I'm just passing everybody, right? That's kind of in my head. So I know when I did my ultra marathon is very different than a marathon, specifically when you're on the trail. But I had a lot of time to think then, and I've had a lot of time to think over the last number of years about this. And that's kind of one of the things that I've kind of come to the conclusion where it does work, right? And there's a method to the madness of the frustration of running slow. Now, I did promise you earlier in the video where I said that if you continuously just run the same thing all the time, every day, every couple of days, whatever, eventually your body adapts to that type of training. So there are times where you're going to have to shift your training a little bit because your body will have adapted to that continuous same type of running over and over again, and your body doesn't, and then your body just gets used to doing the same thing over and over, and so it's not adapting, it's not improving as much as it could if you kind of changed it up a little bit, right? So being able to do a number of faster runs can totally change things up. If you shift and go onto the trails, that could change things for you as well. But you always want to keep the adaptation higher, because when you are able to do that, then your fitness level starts to change and you start to see different types of you start to see that in your fitness and in your training, things start to improve. And that's a cool thing. And I've experienced that myself. Like I always say, get out and run. See you next week.